anything less than a win in this tournament would be extremely disappointing. Um, Even I'd thought about it a bit, like, oh, maybe if we can make the stage and play the grand final, that'd be cool. But then I thought, no, like at the end of the day, like as soon as we finish that game, I'd be extremely depressed if we don't win. So really, anything outside of a win I think we'd consider a massive failure.
Right, so this is episode 43 of Geographically Challenged, and it's been a little while, but we're back again. Very excited to have Bleh back. It's been a little while since you've been on, so welcome back, Bleh. But
you had to fucking put in Forsaken in the fucking title, didn't you? You're fucking cunt.
and the question is, what are we talking about today? Well, hopefully the fact that we've got Bleh back, the fact that we've got Forsaken in the title, and the fact that we've got Roflko and Yourwombat on might give you a bit of an indication that today's episode is all going to be about Indian Counter-Strike, or at least the vast majority of this episode will be about Skyesports Masters, how Roflko and Yourwombat are going, how Indian CS is maybe going as well, and then we'll sort of touch on a couple of little extra things on the back end, little couple updates from Mongolian CS, Chinese CS, OCS, as we all know and love. But first, obviously, welcome to the show, Roflko and Yourwombat. It's nice to have you on. First time for both of you. And, obviously, we want to kind of get your thoughts on this whole Skyesports Masters situation, because this is crazy to me that we've got a couple of Aussie players over in India right now playing in an Indian CS league. So, look, first of all, I guess to either of you, to both of you, what's your experience been like, right? You were talking to me just a little bit earlier there about the old India belly, right? So has that been a bit of a struggle since you've moved overseas?
I'll go quickly first. Firstly, thank you for having us. It's nice to be here. And yeah, definitely, I think that's been the biggest hurdle so far. The Mumbai belly, I think, lasts for about a week. You feel like you're gonna die, and you have to be about 2 meters from a toilet at all times. But yeah, I think if we can conquer that, we can conquer anything. I think we're in good spirits now. But yeah, definitely a hurdle to go over. I'll let you touch on that, Will.
Yeah, there's a point at which we thought we were both going to die, I reckon, but after that it's been a lot better. Yeah, just like basically the way it all worked out was I just got a random Twitter DM. I got on a call. He asked me if I could bring like another Australian player. I reached out to James. After a lot of deliberation, a lot of talking, and a lot of suspicion as to whether it was all real, we managed to make it happen and come over.
Yeah, look, I got to be honest, it did seem like something that would be a little bit too good to be true. I mean, Blair, obviously your boots on the ground in India, you must have heard about this probably before the rest of us, I want to say, or at least you had more information. It seemed like when we spoke about it initially on Geographically Challenged, it seemed like you'd maybe had some conversations in the background and sort of knew what was coming.
Yeah, I think I got on a call with like a few of the guys running Skyesports, and they were like, "Hey, you want to bring CS back?" These guys are like old school Counter-Strike fans, right? So we know what's happening in Valorant right now. Nodvin's the only company running the official league, the VCC. I forgot what it's called right now. So for a lot of TOs, it just made a lot of sense to kind of dip their toes back into CS, also with CS2 on the horizon. So I had a chat with them. And they were like, they're kind of wondering if they want to wait till CS2 launches, which was still a big if and a when, right? So I'm like, listen, if you guys are ready to go for it, just jump in CSGO, see what the pulse is like. Maybe you'll be able to find a few newer talented players. And I think Wombat reached out to me as well on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, right? He actually DM'd me asking about, about these orgs and everything. And I have a history with a lot of shady orgs in India, right? A lot of times you see a bunch of guys, they have money, but they don't really know what they're doing. And it's usually just a clusterfuck, honestly. But I spoke to a few of them. I'm like, yeah, this seems like a pretty legit offer. I think most of these teams, they come from like different esports background, right? Like a lot of them do come from Valorant, from PUBG Mobile, but they have found success there, like teams like Marcos and like Enigma and all these guys. So I looked at them. I looked at the guys who were running this entire thing, the money behind it, and also the sort of partners they were getting. And I'm like, yeah, this looks as legit as it can be, considering it's coming from India. And I was excited. I was still, I wouldn't say cynical, but I was still, tempering my expectations. But at least the way they approached it, it wasn't too crazy, right? 8 teams, mostly Indian players, are like, hey, if you can get in players from outside, you can do that as well. And I think just a couple of teams did that. A few of them, I believe, joined a little last minute. But all in all, I think I'm pretty happy with the way it's kind of playing out right now. I'm just looking forward to how it kind of ends in a couple of months on LAN.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
about it.
I think that's going to be the interesting talking point, and I kind of want to get into that in a little bit. But first, I kind of want to set the scene a little bit more as to like what it's all been like for everyone involved. And so again, I want to jump back over to Roflko and Yourwombat, and the first thing I kind of want to ask is obviously like why would you make that move, right? Because I can have my assumptions, and obviously, I think we all know the state that AUCS is in at the moment and how difficult it is to be a player, and make a living from it and stuff like that. So that would be immediately my assumption as to why both of you would decide to, hey, I'm just going to potentially drop my life and move over to India for 3 months or however long it is that you're there. But do you want to talk to me through the footsteps of the decision making process and why you've both decided to actually end up in India?
Yeah, I think I can probably start with this
Yeah,
one.
that's it.
Yeah, so basically right now, and I think this is how a lot of players and probably a lot of outside people feel with Australia, there's just no national competitions really outside of like online leagues. There's nothing really to play for outside of the 2 international spots. And at least the way I felt until very recently with Rooster qualifying, it was pretty locked in for Vertex and Greyhound. It was like very hard to compete with those teams, and even Rooster. And the good players outside those teams are spread very thin across a bunch of the lower teams, and there's no one really that, at the moment at least, is really able to challenge for those spots. And since there wasn't really anything to play for in Australia outside the international spots, and there's not really a whole lot of money going around outside those top 2 teams. I just thought of it as like a bit of a leap of faith and an opportunity to still like do something this year with CS and try and like progress my career.
Mm.
I was actually committed to going without another Australian player. It was just going to be me and 4 other players from the region initially. But I was fortunate enough that the league got pushed back long enough that James could come.
But you are
So,
IGLing, is that right?
yeah, I'm IGLing. Yeah.
So, was when you got approached or were in discussions, was it like you were going to be the IGL from the outset, or did that kind of happen as you joined the team? Or because like it seems like obviously quite a big, obviously it's a big move to make, but then if you're now IGLing as well, it's almost like you're kind of building a team, trying to put a team together. And I think that could be a challenge across multiple cultures if you're the only one and you're in a new environment and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I was going to be IGLing from the outset. That's the reason they contacted me, was to get me to build a team with them. Actually, originally, before we had this roster, I was offered another roster that is playing in one of the other franchise teams, 4 of those players. And I was going to IGL in that team, but I realized it probably wasn't going to work out because they were 4 players from an existing team. I was an outsider coming in, having to tell them how to play and what to do. And the way they wanted to play the game was very different. So, immediately there was that bit of a, challenge. So the way we approached this, James and I actually built the roster together around us 2. And the way we did it was we watched just an absolute boatload of Singapore server Faceit bugs with Indian players. We just went through, I reckon we watched maybe 20 something players, and each of them we watch a bunch of demos and just look for people who look kind of sharp and kind of well put together. Maybe they move around the map well, and then we just message them one at a time, played some trials from Australia and Singapore servers, and just put them in a roster. Like the players we have now, a lot of them were like working full-time jobs that they quit, or they're about to quit Counter-Strike, or they'd pretty much given up all hope, and then we just put together a roster of puggers, and the logic was that we could teach them.
I mean, Jordan, this sounds exactly what Advent does with Vici Gaming.
Yeah, but
just go around the.
I was going to say this is like it goes to show you kind of the state of Indian CS and where it was at prior, because like obviously there's not there, at least I'm not looking at Indian CS all that much, but from what I could see from the outside was that there wasn't really much of a scene anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at a lot of the players in the league right now, right? And I can recognize maybe a handful of them. I think Velocity played in your team. I think he played for quite a while, at least in some of the lesser teams, right? And a lot of even the players I do recognize are guys who were, let's say, out of the top 5 teams back when Indian CS was really a thing. A lot of the other veterans that kind of moved on to Valorant, they are still playing there right now. So it is good to see a lot of new faces, but also at the same time, I don't know these players that well. I haven't really seen them play in the team or, have been privy to their comms. I actually have a question. You said you're able to select these guys based off, the Faceit PUGs and everything. What was the one thing which kind of like, not one thing, but what were the challenges you kind of faced when you guys actually got together? I'm sure there were quite a few, but what do you think honestly was lacking, and what were you maybe pleasantly surprised with?
Yeah, I think like elephant in the room is communication.
Yeah.
They don't speak English primarily, like a lot of the players. So second language coming over and playing CS, high pressure environment where you're saying 60 words in a minute and you're expecting people to decode what you're saying, put it together, understand the round structure, what's going on. Also like commitment, like people's work ethics. You never know, because we're picking people from Faceit PUGs. You never know if people are going to be committed, whether their attitudes are going to be good, whether they're going to want to listen to people. Like Will is a caller, they might just be like, why am I listening to this guy? I was pleasantly surprised, I think Will was, with like the amount of dedication and commitment that everyone put in. And I guess you can, like, it's testament to them that a lot of them had full-time jobs and they're like, okay, like let's all in, let's play this game. Like with people they've never played with before, people from Australia, they have to start speaking English when they're playing. Like it's a big sacrifice. For us, we drop everything in Australia, but also for them, like they drop their lives here and have trust in us that our system works and that they can follow us and we can, get results. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with work ethic, how much we gelled as a team in a short time. In fact, the synergy was surprisingly really good. Judging off Faceit PUG players with like some Australian players, it's sort of like it's a pretty crazy scenario all around. But yeah, I think there's no other players, and I think I can speak for Will as well. There's no other players here that I'd rather play with, and I feel like we're really lucky for that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have obviously made a pretty significant move, so I kind of wanted to quiz you as to what would be like an acceptable result for you. Because obviously, I look at this on paper and I think, okay, Roflko and Yourwombat, they're probably players from AU that I don't want to like hurt your feelings, or I don't want to offend you, but like, let's be real, you guys were not like the top players when it came to AU competition. But in this event, in this league, it seems like you're kind of like the biggest names. Like you two and Gump and like maybe one or two of the Indian players I've sort of seen around before. But like, actually, as far as I look at it, your team's kind of stacked. Obviously, right now you're at 4-0. You've also got Kingfisher as your coach, so there's another sort of fairly notable name. So I almost look at it and say, if they don't win, then that would be disappointing for them. But what would it be for you? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, anything less than a win in this tournament would be extremely disappointing. Even I'd thought about it a bit, like, oh, maybe if we make the stage and play the grand final, that'd be cool. But then I thought, no, like at the end of the day, like as soon as we finish that game, I'd be extremely depressed if we don't win. So really, anything outside of a win I think we'd consider a massive failure.
Okay.
I would consider it a failure, but it would be disappointing,
I'd agree as well. I mean, you guys are looking better and better as the tournament progresses, right? I think you had the 16-0 win with velocity and everything. Just based off, since we haven't had a chance to speak to other teams as well. What do you think is like the one thing which you would critique, I guess, on the teams you've faced thus far? Because I believe against 7 Seas it was a closer game, but apart from that, everything's been kind of, so to speak, easy, right? Being pretty stock standard games for you guys. Is it anything crazy you're trying? Because I'm assuming you don't have much information on these teams either, because they're kind of new as well. So is it just you guys doing your homework, just working on your stuff, and it just clicking in the server? Or trying something else, or are your opponents being a little, not up to par?
I think I'll quickly answer a bit of that. I think a lot of it is just like fundamentals, We're just trying to play good CS. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not doing anything in particular that's like crazy. We're just trying to play good fundamental CS. We're trying to flash each other. We're trying to have good crossfires, not over peaking, playing man advantage, playing util advantage. I feel like a lot of these teams, so far that we've versed, lack sort of a fundamental understanding. I feel like they don't really take from the EU teams what they can. Like some teams that we've versed didn't know how to throw a half wall flash on Inferno, or like they don't know how to contest basic map control. to a point where it's like really detrimental for them that we can just hold a setup where we have a crossfire and we win the round, or like we win the map if they come. I feel like some insane like raw skill is in these players, but their fundamental understanding of the map, I feel like they don't grasp how important certain smokes are or certain utility is in certain areas to contest map control and everything. And as a team, it seems with some of these teams, it's sort of like YOLO. Like some players will just push through a smoke while there's 3 other players just in AFK, like T-spawn. It's like there's a lack of cohesion with some of these teams. Maybe it's due to like, recent formations. Like 7C strategically were a good team and they were pretty well put together. They had good cohesion, played together. But just saying like some of the other teams we've versed, maybe in scrims and stuff, seemed like there wasn't a direct structure or like a system they were playing under. It was sort of like we have to kill them. If we don't kill them, yeah, it's
He's kind of
not
screwed.
going to go
Yeah.
too well. Yeah, exactly.
So what?
Yep.
Will, would you agree? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like a really big like structural issue where it's like, especially as a caller and being on the other team, like versing them, it feels like we always know what's happening, what they're doing, what they can do, and it just compared to being in Australia, having the read here is a lot easier at the moment. I think it's just an issue of the teams are still developing, and there isn't any really strong leadership or good IGLs here yet that are able to kind of to play the maps that way.
Do you feel that kind of arose from the fact that, for a lot of these teams, it felt like, in your case, right, like you guys got picked up and then you kind of built a team around you guys. Instead, over there, it felt like a lot of the teams joining a little late, they were a little rushed as to just picking up a few players, maybe picking up just an existing 5-man, not really knowing how good they are, and just being like, hey, here's a contract now, you guys are playing. Do you feel that could be, or is maybe a primary factor?
It could be. It could be a contributing factor. For me, as an outsider looking in, it feels that the main issue is just lack of good leadership. I think they haven't really had great opportunities in the region for a while, not a whole lot to play for, which I think would lead to, good leaders and good IGLs and good coaches, all of that never actually being developed. And then when these players come up and there's been like a gap in tournaments for so long, there's no one that can develop them and kind of teach them how to play and no one for them to learn from. And I think that for me is the biggest gap. The teams just aren't set up very well.
Actually, I think that's an interesting question for you, Roflko, because I mean, the way I've always seen you as a player, like you're still, I would say, fairly fresh in terms of your veterancy as an individual. You had a breakout couple of years or a little bit with Vertex and stuff, and then obviously the vacation happened
Faceit,
and
man. Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But it never really felt like you got to the point of being like a veteran or a leader necessarily in any of your rosters. But obviously that's, I think, the role I would see you in again in this team. I would, Yourwombat, obviously, I think you've had a bit of IGL experience and stuff like that. I feel like you've been around a little bit longer maybe than Roflko had, domestically speaking, or at least that's the way I see things. But has that been like weird, or am I like reading into it a little bit too much, or have you had to like change up how you think about team structure and stuff like that and your position in teams?
That's a good question. I feel like the main team I had leadership roles was like DXA, which is like an ESL NZ main team. It wasn't really, one of the top teams, but I feel like I really helped build the structure, build fundamental understandings, and like build up players rather than like focusing on myself. I feel like Vertex, a lot of it was focusing on myself because I had like such a good leader in Brace and structure around me where like PZ, Brace would help me out and they'd help support my understanding of the game, Malta as well, and Addict and every iteration of that roster. Whereas when I moved to like DXA or like lower teams, I feel like I was doing the opposite. I was helping them out, like working on space in path and basic things that you need to nail to like really have a chance. And I feel like in this team, it's good because it's like similar, Will is a great leader. He's like a really good caller. I have a lot of faith in him. And in fact, my role is performing in the server, but also helping make sure the structure is like intact, make sure players know what's going on, making sure everyone feels comfortable when we're playing. Sort of working on myself, but also working on like 3 other players as well. I feel like you're definitely right in what you said, that I help out in a leadership sense, but Will does all the heavy lifting outside of the server. I just try to keep it intact and, you know, sort of deliver the message of what he's trying to say. Yeah, I think
What's
a
it
lot of
like?
the credit goes to Will.
What's the scrim situation like? I mean, are you guys able to get good scrims, or are you able to play against? Because maybe even Bleh, you can kind of chime in here, because I don't know what like the routing is like in India. Like, so what servers can you even play on? Can you play against the Chinese teams, the Mongolian teams, like
You can play in Singapore
etc.?
servers, but
Yeah.
depends on who you're gonna face off against, right?
So yeah, what's that been like for you guys? Have you been able to get good scrims? Because based on your reactions just then, I feel like I'm getting the answer, but
Faceit is the scrim service.
Yeah,
Will can answer.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
to touch on the Faceit thing, yeah, a lot of the teams here genuinely just play Faceit PUGs as 5, and we've done it a few times because sometimes you just can't get games. Singapore, like we played, a Japanese team on Singapore servers a few times, I think maybe an Indonesian team, a few Southeast Asian teams on Singapore server. The problem is all of us have, about 60 something ping there. They all have like 5. So they just play the game differently because they know, they can just swing or we can just swing, and it stops being. Feels like I'm not actually practicing at a certain point. The quality of practice when an entire team has really low or really high ping kind of disintegrates. We haven't even attempted to play in Hong Kong servers because it would be even worse. It'd be like 100 ping, I think, from
It'd be
Mumbai.
over. It would be
Like
over 100 ping.
120.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
150.
unusable. So we have been playing some of the local teams, some of the Indian teams from the franchise, and some teams outside of it here in practice, and that's been okay. Obviously the risk is we have to play these teams twice in like a month period, so we kind of have to schedule it based on when we're going to play them, and even then there's not really any structure for finding scrims. Australian players and players in Europe and North America would know that we have a structure using prac.com where we can all book scrims with each other. As far as I'm aware here, it doesn't exist. The way it works is you message someone for a scrim. It's always assumed that you're playing 2 maps, and each team kind of picks a map like it's a best of 3, and off you go. So it's far from ideal, but we're kind of making the best of what we have.
It does kind of surprise me how, at least in India, you can probably speak to your, I don't know, your org owner or something, be like, hey, move us to Bangalore, the weather's nicer, and I get like 35 ping to Singapore, like 35, 40. And it's so much easier to play with it. But I feel like a lot of orgs are based out of Mumbai because that's where all the money is. And everyone's like, yeah, we're going to stay in Mumbai where it's, the rent's higher and the ping's worse, which makes no sense to me. But if you guys move to Bangalore, I'm just saying everything's fixed. There used to be, I believe, a couple like few Facebook groups and whatnot for like scrims in APAC, but I think it's kind of defunct now. I think no one really uses it, so it's kind of like who you know. But yeah, I think the Faceit thing, Jordan, makes sense because every time I 5-man and Faceit is just these level 10 stacks from Pakistan, from Japan, and then the Mongolians with like 120 ping just fisting you. So that's not a fun time.
It honestly sounds like you guys have just like moved out of Australia to like play in a different version of Australia where you're still kind of geographically isolated and can't actually really properly scrim outside of your region. So I don't know if you've copped a dub there or maybe not, but anyway.
It's not as bad, Jordan.
We're versing international talent, all right?
That's right. Yeah.
It makes us appreciate Australian practice a bit more, I think.
Okay. Well, actually, on that topic, what's pugging like for you guys? Because obviously, I don't know. I don't pug at a high level in AU, but I assume it's like reasonably okay, right? Everyone sort of speaks English. Everyone, they're sort of on top of things. But how's it been like trying to play in? What are you playing on SEA?
Yeah, Singapore servers. Yeah.
Is it good? Is it better?
It's been really fun. Like, apart from the ping differences sometimes, I feel like you just got to cop it, There's people from multiple regions, like sort of big gaps in areas where it's like, you can't expect everyone to be on 20 ping all the time. It's just not logical. I feel like it's been really enjoyable, getting to meet new players, see new ways to play the game, sometimes interesting understandings. But it's really cool, clicking tab and seeing like a Russian 5-stack or a Mongolian 5-stack or a Japanese 5-stack. Stuff that like personally I've never versed. So it is like pretty awesome. People have been like generally friendly. Just it's pugs, depends who you're playing with. But overall, like I can't complain too much. I feel like it's been a really cool experience. And as long as the ping stays below 100, like I'm happy. Sometimes we have ping spikes or our net will go out and we'll be on backup internet and we'll just spike up. But overall, like it's been a cool experience. I feel like I'm playing in Perth, you know,
Hmm.
60 ping plus, just swinging.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, this one's maybe for you, Blair, because like obviously, you know, we don't spend a lot of time actually talking about Indian CS on this show, but I just wanted to know whether there's been like a bit more interest. Like, has this brought anything back? Like, are you getting any sense that people are caring a little bit more about CS in India again? Is it doing anything?
I
Because that was
that's
the
a
whole
hard
point of
question.
this, right? The whole point of this
That's
was
the
to
whole
like
point.
revive
Yeah.
Indian CS. So, is it actually making a difference, or is it maybe too
I'm-
soon?
I'm gonna be realistic. I don't think it's gonna make that much of a difference as I would want it to be there. But at the same time, I feel like it's at the right time, right? Like CS2 should be
Mm.
coming out somewhere, at least based on how the maps are being released, somewhere around August or September, and obviously that's going to be a big boost. It's a free game and everything, and I can see that like the interest in Valorant, it has stagnated a little bit, right? So having more options for people, and you got to remember that a lot of the Valorant audience in India are new people. Like they've never watched Counter-Strike before. They don't know what an FPS is. For them, it's always PUBG Mobile or battle royales like that. When Valorant came out at the right time in 2020 with the COVID thing happening, that's where they got this audience. They found this new audience, and for them having an alternative to watch, which in my opinion is a better game, is going to be, I think, it'll be good for them. And with CS2 coming out, and with this kind of stoking the flames, whatever tiny little embers there are in CS, I think it's a good sign. Also, seeing new players coming out, sure, some of them might be struggling, because it's the first time playing in a team and whatnot. But I feel like finding new talent to kind of foster the next generation, so to speak, in a country, I think it makes a lot of sense. And look, man, like India as a whole in esports hasn't really had much success if you go back like 5 6 years in any game for that matter. And then you have like, but if you look at the population, it doesn't make sense, right? And then you look at PUBG Mobile, where they did find a reasonable amount of success, a lot of big streamers, a lot of highly watched tournaments as well, is because it was able to penetrate the masses, so to speak. So if you can even get like, I don't know, man, like 2 or 5% of that player base, I think that's going to be good. So
Mm.
I don't think it's a bad thing in any way whatsoever, but also we need to be a little bit more tempered with our expectations. That being said, I believe the LAN finals is going to be held in Bangalore, where I'm based out of as well. I'm curious to see how that's going to be. Right, it's in a central location. It's in the middle of the city. One of the parts of the one of the parts of the city. It's a pretty big city, but hopefully, if that can generate some interest, at least from the sponsors and whatnot, and they're like, hey, this looks pretty fucking good. It's a good thing. It can't be a bad thing, Jordan. It just can't.
Well, I mean, obviously, speaking of the finals, I kind of wanted to talk about the broadcast a little bit as well, because like I've tuned in a couple times, and I know and I understand that this is a league that's very much aimed toward India, but there's no English broadcast to my understanding
Right now, yeah.
So I think that could potentially be a bit of a barrier. Like you're spending a lot of money on this Skyesports, putting a lot of money into this, and it to me would make sense to have an English broadcast on the side, just because it's like, why not potentially have that option open? Like I think at this point, probably there aren't a lot of people outside of India that are interested in Skyesports Masters, but would it not be a world where maybe it gets a little bit bigger, you want to have that English broadcast, and potentially in maybe another season, players are getting imported from other regions as well? And that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Bless. So maybe you can fire off at both of them. A, the lack of English broadcast, and B, the import slots. Do you like it, not like it, or what do you think?
Well, for the English broadcast, I did read something somewhere where someone was like, there is an English broadcast, it's just hard to find. I couldn't find it myself.
I didn't find it.
I didn't find it myself. So yeah, that's a big negative in my opinion, because you do want outside people just poking in and seeing what's happening. And also Hindi broadcast, not everyone in the country speaks Hindi, by the way. I barely speak the language myself, even though I can understand it. So I don't think it's ideal. You want to broadcast in both the languages. That being said, I know that the LAN finals will be in English. They might have a separate they reached out to me, so I'm like, yeah, I have given a couple of names as well, as to like, hey, if you want to get more people from outside, these are the names you can reach out to. So yeah, there will be an English broadcast, at least for the Grand Finals, and I hope for the next season they will prioritize having both. For the imports coming in, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a great thing to have imports. It's still maintaining like the 60% of the team should be local, right? So you have 3 Indian players, and the one thing I've noticed about a lot of the Indian players going all the way back, like, 10 years back and whatnot, is the fact that there's always like a vicious cycle of, no new ideas coming in. So you have a new player, a brand new kid, 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid who's like super sharp, knows the fundamentals, and he joins a team, and then he starts building up a lot of bad habits, and his understanding the game never really grows, right? So it becomes kind of like they kind of stagnate as individuals. And having new people coming in doesn't you don't have to be like a tier one player of coming in from EU or whatever. It's just about different fresh ideas of people who have played in a higher level than you have. I think overall it really helps the team. I mean, just looking at Enigma, with Roflko and Yourwombat, like these guys are looking so good right now, even though I barely recognize the other players they're playing with. It's because if you look at the other teams, a lot of them they have picked up. Not a lot of them. I think 2 teams have picked up international players, right? I do believe there's Kara from Malaysia. I think he
Gump is in
played
the
with.
team.
Yeah, he's playing one of those teams, and then you have Gump as well. But I don't know how many of them have them as like IGL to leaders. And again, even when you have it as an IGL, like you brought up earlier, Wombat, it's like you want to kind of build it around yourself. You don't want to be the one guy outside voice coming in into a pre-existing team. And a lot of these guys, they've just stuck with could be budgetary issues, could be the fact that they didn't really have time to kind of really build a team. But you could see how easy of a time Enigma and easy of a time you guys are having right now in the league. I think it says for itself, right? So if all these teams they do stick around for the next season, which I hope they do, I would expect to see some outside blood coming in, right? Some from a more progressive CS region. And in Asia, it doesn't really exist apart from, let's say, maybe in China, perhaps. But then again, in China, it's going to be a language issue. So Australia just seems like the best bet for me. It's reasonably close by, and a lot of these players have played with Asian teams as well. When it comes to, I don't know, like at least once upon a time in the Asian minors and RMRs and everything, or even if they're able to get like a couple of players from EU, maybe from Serbia, for example, because we had that happen in India a few years ago where they picked up. Faceit was coaching for Wolf back in 2014, if memory serves me right as well. So yeah, it could be from a coaching standpoint, from an IGLing standpoint, but definitely having new blood coming in. This franchise model, I think it works, at least to kind of grow the scene initially.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I guess I'd like to get your thoughts as well on just I don't know. I mean, it's probably too early to say, but as far as the future is concerned for this like project, I think for Roflko, Yourwombat, both of you, I kind of want to know like what's your outlook? Are you enjoying it? Do you think it's valuable? Would you play another season, right? If there was another season and you got invited back, what do you want to do with this team as well? Like, is this team just a Skyesports Masters team, or is it like, okay, we're here in India, we're playing this, we might as well try and give it a crack with everything else? So like, what's just your general sentiment, and what's the experience been like as we sort of start to wrap up the topic?
Yep. I think to begin with, like what we want to do with the team, I think I speak for just myself right now, and I think Will agrees. I just want to build up the players as much as we can, make them as strong as we can individually and as like new team players. So, not too sure what the future holds. We'll have to see before I answer that one, like the opportunities, whether there's another season, what's going on there. But like from an individual standpoint, I just want these players to be, good fundamental players, understand how the game works, why they do certain things, not just go for kills because they can, just because they're better than someone, just sort of bring up the overall understanding and knowledge of the game so then they can teach to other people. Just say if we don't play again. I want these players to, become like new leaders in the region. I feel like that's sort of, we're teaching them, or we're trying to teach them to play like better CS, not just PUGs CS.
I
And
actually,
that will, yeah.
I actually wanted to like add on to that question from Jordan. Like you mentioned earlier, comms being the primary issue initially, right? But that's more of a team thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's more like, hey, we need to communicate in the same language. But what were the main big things which you found were lacking for these three guys individually, maybe understanding the game, which you felt you were really able to kind of fix or kind of alleviate a little bit overall?
Will can answer that one.
Yeah, just like anything you could think of that a team does well and in a PUG you wouldn't do. So like playing man advantage situations, just not throwing the round. Remember, like knowing like util to help your teammates. Running set rounds. The way we think of set rounds, at least in Australia, is it's kind of like it's an easy thing to do, right? It's like the easy round. It's the easy way to play.
Yeah.
Maybe if your players are a little bit worse than the other teams, you just run a bunch of set rounds because you can't mess them up. You don't have to think much. Whereas our experience here with set rounds, for example, is they're really, really hard to get right. People aren't used to having like a strat book or like having to like know util and remember a role. So it's kind of the opposite of what we're used to. So just like getting our players used to playing that style and used to even just like having notes. Yeah.
That's kind of interesting because if you look at like any new team coming out, right? Like for me, the team that jumps to mind would be Ents when Snappy just joined the team. He had a lot of new players. The one thing they specialized were in set rounds, right? Just calling based off the spawn. Hey guys, we're gonna go for this fast B, just a fast wrap around A or whatever. Which logically that would be the easier ones for you guys to implement instead of a defaulting strat where and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of players in Asia in particular, when I've played with them, when I speak with them, their idea of what a default is very skewed in a way where they're like, default, okay, I'm going to be holding mid, and they don't know really what to do after that. They don't know like, okay, we're going to be working together to getting this map control, defaulting into something, right? Are these similar challenges you faced? And also, like, why do you think that some of these players they struggle with the concept of like, you're going to be flashing twice over half wall, you're going to do the smoke, and we're running into B? Like, why was that such a hard concept for them to kind of grasp, you feel?
I think it's just they've just never done it before. Like to answer the second point, it's just like not normal to do those kind of things. Like
Because of a pug, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
makes
like
sense.
playing a pug, like you're kind of playing on the fire, playing for yourself, versus kind of sacrificing yourself a little bit, or maybe just like just landing difficult util, having like the right binds to be able to throw it. It's just all like a bit new. It's things we obviously weren't anticipating we'd have to like think about, but people have been really good at at still adapting and learning. Like credit to them, like not it's something completely new, and they've managed to round that corner relatively quickly.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot better now. Um, what was the first point? Sorry.
I think
I
talking
think it
about
was it was a
defaults and
defaulting, yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I think it's exactly as you said with defaulting. A lot of players understanding here of that, I think, is just yeah, you just go to a spot and you hold it. Maybe you try and kill someone, as opposed to actually having a goal in the round, like trying to get map control. Like Inferno is an obvious example, like trying to take like banana or whatever, using like util to do it, playing as a team, moving your numbers around. Um, it's yeah, it's like a very it feels like sometimes the understanding is based on like something from like 2014 or 2015, as opposed to something a little more modern as well. Like a lot of things I hear or a lot of things I see from the other teams as well is just stuff that we haven't seen in years.
yeah.
So I think there's a bit of that as well.
I think
Cool.
adding on to that as well, it comes down to sort of like research and just like leadership. I feel like a very important thing that people overlook is some players will understand why you do specific like set roles or set rounds, or why you do your default in mid or banana to take map control and deny information and everything. But some players just don't have that knowledge, which is okay because like not everyone has that to begin with. I think explaining the basics is extremely important to every player, not just in India. It's like making sure players understand why they're doing their role. Even if it's simple to you, you should just go over it, explain it. It makes players so much more competent, so much more confident as well when they're playing. Like they know they have value in the role. They know why they're throwing their flash. So in that sense, they practice their flash because they don't want to miss it. They know how important it is. They know why they're defaulting mid to deny certain information. So they won't just hide and throw nothing,
Yeah.
when they're doing a set round. They'll know how to condition it. All those like basics are extremely, extremely important. It's like building the foundation of like playing good CS. And I feel like it's brushed over a lot, especially in like, I don't know, Australia as well. Some players, you ask them why they're doing specific plays and they'll have no idea. They'll just be because my IGL called it. Where, it's just a little more time. It might take more time to build up the team and get results, but overall, you will be a stronger team.
Are you guys still like micromanaging quite a bit? I assume you are, or
It's like in the mid round and the late round, but I think we've managed to set up a structure like pretty quickly where players are able to kind of understand their role at least early in the round. I always have something in mind. Like I always call something at the start. It won't necessarily be like a whole end round. But I think our players, at least compared to other teams, are actually quite good now at knowing what their job is at least at the start of the round. And I really only have to micro once where, once the round is broken down and it starts getting a bit
Clutches
messy,
and stuff.
I,
Yeah,
I have to micro a
those
lot then.
moments.
But outside
Gotcha.
of it, they've been very impressive in that respect. Now that we've got a structure.
Nice.
All right, so final question I have for the Skyesports Masters topic is, what would we consider a success to be for Skyesports Masters? Like, what is there a metric by which we can say it's done well? You know, is it X amount of viewers on the broadcast? Is it, amount of interest? Is it players playing to a certain level? I have an answer for this, so if no one has one off the top of their head, I can get it started. But if anyone wants to go first.
I could try going first here.
Mm.
For me, this event reminds me of a little bit more high profile um version of a lot of events that take place in EU, except the caveat being that obviously it's a much more underrepresented area with like, much smaller scene. But if you look at like, for example, in Finland, they had the Elisa tournaments, right? Elisa Cup, where it initially was just about the Finnish teams, and you'd find a lot of pretty solid talent who eventually wound up in teams like ENCE and get picked up by other orgs, like Jimpat, for example, by Mouse NXT, who is now playing for Mouse. I believe he played one of the teams in Elisa. Likewise, if you look all the way towards Eastern Europe, you have like in Estonia, for example, you have ROPS, but who else do you have, right? Like, likewise, you have these smaller countries who have one or two famous players, but don't really have a scene. And this, for me, is the kind of the equivalent of that. It's about kind of fostering the region again, trying to make something, happen from it and having its own scene, having its own healthy ecosystem, so to speak, right? And if that leads to a tournament structure where you get to see these teams and new players playing more frequently, if it winds up in a solid LAN event where things run off with as minimal a hitch as possible, because shit will break down at some point or the other. I think for me that's already a pretty good solid success.
Yeah, I
Over to you two.
definitely think just having the event run smoothly, having no scandals escape any of that,
Sure.
Yeah.
and just getting 4 teams on LAN without delays and making the event smooth. Everything looks good. Everything's professional. Production so far has been great. And hopefully getting like a crowd at the LAN. I understand the LAN finals will be on HLTV.
Yeah.
So at the very least, because of gamblers, they're going to be able to get like a decent amount of viewers once it's on HLTV. But I really think they need multiple seasons before they start seeing any real effects of the event.
Agreed.
There's not going to be any significant increase in the level of competition after just one season. Like they're not going to be competing with overseas teams still, but hopefully after a few seasons of the event, um, and maybe some more imports coming over and helping kind of foster some of the local players and build them up to a point where they're going to be leading future teams and running their practice in a more
Efficient.
more efficient and progress way from other regions. Then I think that's when we'll start seeing the effects of the event.
Yeah,
I just want to add
definitely
on to
agree.
Jordan. I feel like the one thing we got to look at, if I was like the people in power, like running this entire event, right? You're not looking at any of these teams right now, or in the foreseeable future to be competing in, the majors or even the RMR, so to speak. I feel like there are already a lot of teams in Asia itself which are far ahead of them. But to make this sustainable, it's about trying to build that local viewership where, despite the fact that you have these local teams and everything, a few of these teams a few of these orgs have some pretty massive following, right? Teams like Velocity, even Enigma, for that matter. If you can get a couple of orgs like GE, for example, to come on in, I think it'd be pretty solid for them. So making it sustainable for these local orgs to feel a team, have a decent enough viewership, and kind of stoke the flames of interest from the local fans of esports. I think as long as that is maintained and it's sustainable, that can sustain this for like a few more seasons. That's when you're going to finally see changes, when you're going to see players who are like, yeah, this guy's a solid pickup. We could probably pick him up, and maybe I don't know, like your favorite team Elfishguy, maybe one of the Chinese teams, maybe Advent's watching these tournaments. Is like, I want to pick this guy
Man,
up.
I'd be
I mean,
so
that could
surprised if
happen,
that
right?
happened.
I don't think that that's ever going to happen, but still, like that would be the direction where I feel like Indian CS as a whole, maybe not as a team, but at least individually, if you can, we're able to bring out like 3 or 4 of these guys who understand the game to a high level and also have that innate skill set in them. I think that would be the right way to go about things.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely. Yeah.
did you have something?
I think just, yeah,
Mm.
I think it just builds on the others, right? It's just, I think for it to go well, it just needs to be accessible. People need to know how to watch it, when to watch it, or that they can watch it, you know? You guys were asking questions before about like possible English broadcasts. It shouldn't be a scavenger hunt to find that. It should be open. You should just be able to click it, because as soon as things get difficult for the spectator, they just like, they zone out. They're like, okay, I'll just do something else. I'll watch something else. I think, yeah, multiple opportunities for the players to build as players into, you know, more structured, strong players potentially playing in international teams. You know, it's like a pipe dream right now, but maybe 2 years from now, we could be seeing some players moving over to different Asian teams and becoming strong competitors. Like, yeah, just building up the opportunity for the players so then the ecosystem can thrive and like start to run itself. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, my answer was, and it kind of ties into what you were saying, Blair. Like, it's not necessarily like a metric which I think needs to be hit or anything like that, but I would like to see an Indian team or multiple Indian teams actually trying to qualify for the Asia RMR or even making it to the Asia RMR through the Middle Eastern qualifier. Because if I go back and I have a look at the last couple of open qualifiers for the Middle Eastern qualifier for the, like, so we're not even going to the Asia RMR. We're going to, not even going to the Middle Eastern qualifier. We're going to the open qualifier for the Middle Eastern qualifier. There aren't even any Indian teams in there or even players. So I think if you got to a point where it doesn't necessarily have to be a team from Skyesports Masters, it could be, or it could be a composition of players from it. If you saw that, that's the point at which you go, okay, we're now starting to get to a level where maybe the fundamentals are there that they can compete. Even at the lower level within Asia, it's like you're actually making some kind of a difference. And I think that's where you can start to be like, all right, maybe this is having some success somewhere. So
it could even be a player, man. Like if you look at the Mongolian scene right now, you go back a few years ago, like you go back to 2015 when Mongol just like destroyed Renegades, right? But if you go back another couple of years prior to that, the only player I knew about was Zilkenberg, and then Machine Gun comes out, and they were the Mongolian players who were picked up by an Indian team to play. And I didn't know anything about Mongolians at that point. I'm like, okay, who are these guys? And they just shat on everyone, and then the team comes out, right? So even if just one player gets picked up and he's able to make a decent impact, maybe like a Bentet-esque sort of player, so to speak, I think that could itself. There's a big fan culture. There's like a big hero worship culture in India. That's something I feel like Yourwombat and Roflko saw as well. Like movie stars and players and everything and streamers. People love watching a success story. We haven't had that yet in CS. The moment we have 1 or 2 guys who have that ability to kind of swing it with the big boys, you're gonna see a big, and I'm saying a massive like pump in interest from the average fan. And that is just going to lead to more people being inspired to maybe give it a shot. And maybe you might find the next Rops or whoever from the country, right? So yeah, lack of success stories, but once you see even 1 or 2 happen, that's a catalyst that's needed. And I feel like this entire project is leading to that, right? Making that catalyst kind of appear.
Yeah, the talent's definitely here. It just needs to be developed.
Dude, when I play sometimes when I play a Faceit in Singapore servers, and I face off against like some Indian 5-man stacks, and I just get destroyed. I'm like, oh, why aren't you guys playing? Like, you guys are pretty solid. They're so sharp, but you never see them play like in a tournament or something, right? So if this opens up an avenue for them, I think that's great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps up the discussion around Skyesports Masters. We've got a couple of other quick fire topics to touch on. First of all, you were talking about Mongolian CS a little bit there, Blair. I think we should jump in and have a bit of an update on Mongolian CS. Now, since we last spoke on Geographically Challenged, and this is actually going back a little while, I think the biggest news of note was that Eruption disbanded. So that was obviously the 2nd seed in the Asia RMR from Mongolia. They disbanded. They're not a team anymore. But what is interesting out of that, and I'm sure you've been keeping up to date with this, Blair, I don't know about the other 2. Atox, this new Mongolian team, I actually think they look pretty good. They've been having some pretty good results. So the team is Cabal, Dobu, Kulast, Yami, MIQ, and Bartak. So again, it's like one of these situations where you've got like a 6-man core or something like that. But you're probably gonna hate me, Blair, but they have actually had good results. All right, top 2 in the Mongolian National Championship, which obviously they lost to the Mongols, but aside from that, top 2 already in Mongolia is pretty good, and they won the Perfect World Arena Premier League Season 4, which had a couple of other decent teams in it. So I don't know. I feel like this is a team to keep an eye on, or are you a hater?
I'm not a hater. It's just that, dude, I can't even find them on Liquipedia, man. Or
They don't have a
HLTV.
Liquipedia page. You have
Or
to
an
go...
HLTV. Say it's hard to find.
Yeah, but this is the thing, though, is this is fucking Asian CS in a nutshell. They've actually competed in a lot of stuff. Just for some reason, no one's actually made a page for them.
Here's my thing, dude. Like, how many times have I seen Cabal and Dobu and this mixture of these players we've known who haven't really done much, right? So until they go to an RMR or go to, like, I don't know.
If they're
like
top 2 in Mongolia,
play-in.
they're going to go to an RMR.
I don't know. There's still Tyloo. I still haven't Tyloo. Okay, jokes aside, look, they look decent, but for me, I was looking at, IHC / the Mongols with the new players coming in, right? Like with Blitz and with Techno 4K, Annihilation, and Score, and that's where I was kind of looking as a future of Asian CS or Mongolian CS and new players coming in. So I mean, kudos to Dobu and Cabal and all these guys for being second best in Mongolia and beating all these teams and whatnot, but I feel like they've had enough opportunities and enough time to really kind of peak and make an impact overall, and they haven't done that. They've just plateaued. They've just almost make it and then just kind of like fall off, kind of taper off, right? So I'm gonna be very reserved in my expectations for them. I'm still gonna stick with the Mongols. I don't know who 910 and Mizinho is that well for the Mongols, but I have more faith in the unknown rather than a known quantity who haven't done much.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that on the last episode a little bit, I think, when you weren't here, this new Mongols roster, and jury's kind of out. We're not too sure, but they still seem to be the top team in Mongolia, so that's, I guess, the update there. The only thing that I will say about Atox, from my conversations when I was in Mongolia, casting the RMR, all the Mongolians seem to be really high on Yami. Now, I never really felt like when I was watching Mongolian CS that Yami was like someone that I was like, oh yeah, he's like super sick. He wasn't the score or the annihilation to me, but they maybe know something that we don't, obviously being involved in that scene a little bit more. So I'll kind of keep an eye on this Atox team. And look, the results so far, I think, are speaking for themselves. So we'll see how they go. But I agree, they do have a little bit of a ways to go when it comes to playing at an RMR. But they've got time. There's still a little while.
So it's quite a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in what,
another 6
March?
months or something. Yeah.
Jan. It's a new game as well. You never know.
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously Mongols, we talked about that. We'll see how they go at Cologne. That's going to be the first big test with that new roster. So that's in about a week or so. Probably have an update for you guys when we get onto the next episode of Geographically Challenged. But here's one for the Aussie boys. I don't know if you watched, but the ESL Pro League qualifiers were over the last weekend. Rooster qualified over Vertex.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to weigh in because, I don't expect Blair to really keep up with Oceanic CS. So, I mean,
I didn't watch it as well. I was a bit surprised. I won't lie.
Were you? Okay. Well, I was a little bit surprised that it was as clean as it was. Do you guys have any thoughts on the Rooster and Vertex rivalry?
I was shocked personally. We haven't been in Australia for a bit now, but at least when I was still practicing Australian scrimming against Vertex, it felt like there was no team that was even close to them other than like outside of, Vertex and Greyhound. It felt like there was just a massive void, and that, yeah, it was just crazy to me when Rooster beat them. I think Rooster have like super good individuals. And it seems that every time they have an important game, they just keep showing up. I guess Vertex didn't. I remember when they beat Vertex last time, for I think it was at the end of last year actually, when they beat Vertex in champs. I remember seeing their players like 1,000 kills in DM leading up to it. So maybe they applied the same formula and just whacked them again. I also think nerves for some of the Vertex players might have had a part. But yeah, I guess Rooster just keeps showing up whenever it matters.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is pressure based. Like when you feel like you are the better team and you're the team that, this spot's ours, we deserve this spot. It's pretty hard when you go into the game and you start getting like dominated to like mentally come back from that. I'd say a lot of it is pressure based because I feel like Vertex, outside of this event, seemed like a way stronger team structurally, individually. Like they were very, very impressive. Like this is sad to say, but like it was a crazy iteration of Vertex, like the best iteration, and they were just like, I feel like these spots were theirs, and they felt it as well. Like they were just excellent. They were crazy in practice. In most officials, they were performing like they were destroying. And then when it came to the actual qualifying game, pressure sucks, but like it does have a massive factor. Like things do get in your head. You'll make mistakes that you just wouldn't make ever. Like you play 20 scrims, 19 and 20, you would never, make a simple error. But then you do it in the official, and it starts to get in your head. Vertex, great team. Like I was shocked. We were pracking, and I was like showing Will the scores. We were playing. I was like, damn, this is not good. But yeah, Rooster, I feel like individually they're just insane. And I feel like a massive thing that they have is that they believe in themselves. Like as corny as it sounds, like they
Power
go
of
into the
belief.
server, literally they go into the server and they're like, I'm the best player. I'm gonna win my team this game. And it shows like when
Do they still
TJP
have
30.
do they still not have a real coach for Rooster? I don't know.
No.
I don't think so, right?
JHD.
I don't know.
That's not a real
He's
coach.
tweeting like it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Listen,
nah.
I was
He's-
watching them in EPL last season, and yeah, against FaZe they got banged out. I think they played against Pain after that, and that was a
Yeah.
reasonably close map. I think on Anubis. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Against Double O Nation, they had Double O Nation. They destroyed them in Anubis. They had them against a Rook twice on 2 maps,
Yeah.
Jordan, and watching them
I
just
watched it. I remember watching it.
not one tag time. I'm like, dude, just
Mm.
calm down for a second and
But
just
that's
get the
Rooster though,
win.
bro. Like that's
don't
who
believe
they
in
are.
that.
Yeah, they just play like
That's
they,
too much of belief there, Jordan.
It's
That's
the
too much
exact
of fucking
same thing they
belief
do
there.
domestically, right? And obviously they get away with it domestically. When you go overseas, maybe it punishes them. You both actually brought up the individuals topic, and I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit here as well because, I think we've all talked for years about Chelios and ASAP, and like even to an extent Netic. Everyone was like really like excited about Netic quite a lot as an individual. But one player that I want to highlight a little bit, and I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should feed his ego at all, but I think actually TJP has been really good lately. Like I looked at his stats. I watched the games as well in the Pro League qualifier, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this guy's like fucking owning everyone. And I don't know if he's getting enough of a highlight in the Oceanic scene right now, because like we're always talking about ins, we're talking about Faceit, this and that, and like obviously they're excellent players, but is TJP like quietly becoming one of the more exciting riflers in the Oceanic scene? He had a 1.22 rating in the last 3 months, right? Which is pretty insane. And contextually, Ins has a 1.3 rating over the last 3 months. ASAP has 1.28 rating, and Vexat has a 1.26 rating. And they're the only ones that are above him. And they're all playing like the same kinds of things. I filtered it by like the Oceanic matches, the online matches, so that, Vexite and Ins aren't getting fucked by playing against, overseas teams. So I don't know, like, am I reading into it too much? Like, what's your experience playing against him or seeing him in servers? Do you think he's actually like legit at that point?
I'll feed the ego a bit. Like, he had a really quick rise. Like from watching him play in the first sort of like roster move of Rooster, I went live. I was like, oh, it's gonna be farm, versus TJP, like this player, because at that point they had like the bans and all that, players can play. He got so much better so quickly, and I feel like a lot of it is confidence based. I don't know what it's like in the Rooster camp, but maybe they were gassing him up. They were telling him, just play confident, play your game.
Wait, they kicked him.
Because he's been.
They kicked him and then brought him back, So it's like, what the fuck's going on here?
He's doing it out of spite now. That's the strongest power you can have.
Yeah.
But I feel like he is really impressive. Like individually, he's pretty crazy. Even when he went to the Encore roster for a little while, he was like top in that leaderboard. He was carrying games with hats. Like you can't really deny that he is really strong individually. And his stats show it. And like when you watch him play, it shows it. He plays maybe not the best CS all the time, but he plays it with full confidence. Like he will just like rip your head off and like get a 4K where realistically you're like, oh, that shouldn't happen, but he does it. He is like pretty impressive, and his stats, like, they're really freaking awesome. Like, I don't know. Will, what do you think?
Yeah, we and James were talking about this actually after they beat Vertex. We were looking at TJP's stats recently, and he just has like an insane amount of carry performances on that team. Like it's crazy. How many games he's just like dragged them. Like not they might have won anyway. But he just like gets like an insane amount of kills. I don't know what is like inside TeamSpeak or inside the server or whatever, like inside their team. But at least versing him, yeah, sometimes it feels like he's not making like the best choice, the highest percentage play. But he's got like the mechanics and everything to kind of just make it work anyway. And I think that with his confidence, just to like you know, fight anyone at any time makes them like pretty scary.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes for TJP, and I think for Addict as well. Like for me, those are the kind of the two players right now that I'm like keeping an eye on that I feel like haven't kind of reached their potential just yet, or haven't had the opportunities just yet to reach their potential. That maybe heading into CS2 potentially are going to be two of the guys that come out on top of AUCS. But we'll shelve that for the moment. We've got one more topic. This one's for you, Bleh, because you missed out on the last episode, and I feel like you have probably got some hot takes on Tyloo. Okay, have you seen this new Tyloo roster?
No.
Okay, well,
this
is actually going to be fantastic. This is exactly what I want. So look it up. Tell me
yeah,
what you think.
Oh, you mean doing this lineup? Yes, I thought they changed something else. In which case, I would have just lost my shit. Yeah. My short answer or opinion on this is no.
Fair enough.
Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, look, individually speaking, I love Freeman. I think Freeman's a solid player overall. Then you have Slowly, who's very underrated because he's not the star of the team or his ex team, but he was the guy who was kind of like the guy clutching things out. He was doing all the shit rolls and everything, and still delivering in a server. Score, we all know, is really good. Roga, the Serbian, I don't know much about him in all honesty, but he was picked up by Emmy, and then Emmy IGL coach. He's been through the entire thing with those lineups with Nexa and Hunter and all these guys, right? I think it was called Crazy and all those teams in the past. I feel his playing days are kind of behind him. I think he would work better as a coach. I think there's nothing wrong with having him as a coach. But if you look at his team, it just feels like such a big downgrade. Because one more thing you got to bring into the picture here is the English. I don't know Slowly's English, if it's good. And even Score, I've spoken to him, and even his English is like, barely there. Now, Freeman, he's from Hong Kong. Most people from Hong Kong can speak some pretty solid English, so I think that's going to be okay. But I think that just the comms itself, and I feel like I don't know if Tyloo haven't learned from this, right? Just having multiple players coming in when you have, core players who can't speak English at all, it's just such a no-go for me. And even now, if I look at the stars, I don't see any stars here. Score worked in that team. He worked well in IHC / the Mongols. It's not like he, was the super hard carry of the team like Bentet was for Tyloo once upon a time. So I'm looking at his team, and it just feels like a Frankenstein's monster on meth.
Okay, fair enough. Bad. That's one way to put it. Look, we haven't really been able to watch much of their gameplay yet because they haven't really been playing in anything. So it's been a while. I think it's been like a month maybe since we did the last episode where we talked about Tyloo, or a few weeks. The only thing they've actually played in is the Challenger League relegations, where they did manage to hold on to their spot. So they are in ESL Challenger League Season 46. The teams they beat: D13, FYR Esports, Drift LNS, all teams that I've never heard of. And get this, they beat a team called Asian Balls. Okay, so I mean, we're really at the peak of Asian CS at this point.
Amazing.
Which, by the way, that's not even an Asian team. They're Russian. So you tell me.
And they're called Asian Balls.
They're called Asian Balls. So
I mean, Russia is a part of Asia, so yeah, fair.
That's the kind of teams that they're beating. In that meanwhile, though, I will say they lost to GR Gaming. I've heard a little bit about them, but I don't think, I don't really rate them too much. Cat Evil as well, we've heard a little bit about them, but they're definitely not at the top of Asian CS. And FYR Esports. So they've actually lost to 3 teams that are like, or been outperformed by, maybe not directly lost to, but they've been outperformed by 3 teams, which, like, I don't know, man. Not even winning the relegation for a team like Tyloo, for an org like Tyloo.
Well, it is their first tournament with this lineup.
Yeah,
right?
I know,
like,
but
whole new language and everything.
This used to be the best team in Asia. This used to be a top 10 team in the world. Org.
That's a long time ago, Jordan.
I know, but like
go.
the bigger they are, man, the bigger they are.
I've let it go. You need to let it go. The Rare Adam's still doing good. I mean, kind of.
It'd be cool to see them return to a full Chinese lineup.
They had one.
Yeah, I know, but like until this, I don't know. I thought it'd be nice if they just stuck with that because there's so many players there with so much talent. It's a kind of a weird move.
It is a bit. It is a little bit. Anyway, I don't know. We'll see how that one works out. We'll keep you guys up to date with how that all shakes up. But that's the end of the episode for another one. So thanks, guys, for coming on. Anything you want to say before you go?
No, thanks for having us. It was a cool experience. Hashtag fear the enigma, you know?
Yeah, the Enigma. There you go.
No, we love India. Love our Indian fans. All of that stuff.
Have you got a
Thanks
lot
for
of
having us.
Indian followers or anything like that on Twitter?
We're growing it. We're,
little bit.
Has
we're
it, has it been
rising,
pumping?
yeah.
You guys need to.
The homies are backing us
I
up.
haven't
They're
seen you
supporting
streaming
us.
much. I think you guys need to stream.
We've been playing
Maybe.
like 12 hours a day.
I've been working people pretty hard, yeah.
Yeah,
It's probably
We've had
my
like
fault.
12 hours a day, so when it comes to like after prac, sort of just flop over and die.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll get on the 8-hour stream grind, 12-hour prac days, 4 hours of sleep.
Easy.
Yeah. We get
Listen,
crazy.
Jordan, you only start streaming once you become shit. Remember that. It's
Exactly.
not shit yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you,
All
Blair.
right. Well, look, yeah, let's wrap it up there. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Make sure
Thanks for
like,
having
comment,
us.
subscribe, do all those things. Buymeacoffee.com/Elfishguy and follow everyone on Twitter. See you next time.
Wasting time.